Welcome back. I'm Mike, and this is To Be Continued With. Today, we're going to review the Disney Plus series Hawkeye. It stars Jeremy Renner, Haley Steinfeld, and Alaqua Cox. The series focuses on the amazing avenging archer and his young admirer who ends up becoming his protege. This Marvel Phase 4 series takes place after the events of Endgame and is heavily influenced by the Matt Fraction comic book of the same name. Now, Jeremy Renner returns as Clint Barton, and he's joined by Haley Steinfeld's Kate Bishop. The premise of the show is that they try to recover Barton's Ronin costume that he wore after the events of Infinity War. And then the focus turns onto a mysterious watch that has connections to Clint Barton's family life. Now, with that being said, let's cue the intro and start the show. This 6-episode series picks up 1 year after the events of Avengers Endgame. But actually, it starts off with a flashback to the year 2012, specifically in the final battle of the first Avengers movie. Here, we see a young Kate Bishop who lost her dad when the Chitauri attacked. With the battle wrecking havoc, she catches Hawkeye fighting off the aliens through a hole that was made in her apartment. And seeing Clint in action really inspires her to be the best in everything she does. She trains in gymnastics, karate, fencing, and a slew of other things, but most importantly, archery. Now, through the images that look like they leapt from the pages of the 2012 comic book, we get our show's intro. Here, it's Christmas time, and after getting into some trouble in school, Kate gets kicked out of school. With that being said, Clint is introduced in a very funny way. He's in New York with his kids, and they're taking in a Broadway show titled Rogers the Musical. Yes, someone actually made an Avengers musical, and it's priceless. Now, the adventure begins at a charity event that also has a black market auction taking place in a secret room at that same event. The Ronin sword and costume are up for sale, but the auction gets interrupted by the Tracksuit Mafia, who are there to get their hands on a gold Rolex watch. Kate sneaks in and ends up putting on the Ronin costume to fight off the gang, which ends up causing an uproar and also gets the attention of Hawkeye himself due to seeing the footage on the evening news. Clint ends up rescuing Kate from her second attack with the Tracksuit Mafia and now is joined by Lucky the Pizza Dog, who Kate ends up rescuing on the way. Now, the Hawkeye series is in full swing. They regroup at Kate's apartment, and Clint explains the significance of the Ronin suit and its reputation. They get attacked again by the Tracksuit Mafia and end up in another apartment hideout, and Clint ends up trying to retrieve that suit, but it's gone. When he finds out that a LARPing group, live-action role-playing, has found that suit, he befriends them and gets the suit back, but then sends his kids back home to the farm so he can stay with Kate until everything is safe. Kate's mom, Eleanor, who runs a cybersecurity firm, is engaged to a man named Jack, who has some very impressive sword skills, considering that he's named after the swordsman. He's a Marvel Comics character who not only has ties to Hawkeye's origin, but eventually becomes a member of the Avengers himself. They both have their shady moments and are characters that you want to keep your eye on. Laura Barton, Clint's wife, is holding down the fort back at home and is really understanding because she's very supportive of what he's about to do. In order to learn the motives of the Tracksuit Mafia, who, by the way, are a great set of street-level villains because they all wear tracksuits and constantly say the word bro after everything they say. At the moment, Clint gets himself caught and he meets their boss after Kate tries to rescue him. But since that doesn't go as planned, they both are now in the clutches of the Tracksuit Mafia. Maya Lopez is known as Echo in the Marvel Comics, and she's played by Alaqua Cox, who is deaf, just like Maya. And just like in the comics, Echo is able to mimic the movement of others by simply looking at them while they're in action. Now, the night her father died, she was able to witness what went down. She sees that he was killed by Ronin. The funny thing is that this takes place in a garage named Fat Man Auto Repair and is a great nod to someone we're going to meet later on. At their HQ, which happens to be an old toy store warehouse, Maya allows Clint to use his hands because she notices his hearing aid and presumes that he's deaf just like her. Clint tells Maya that the Black Widow killed Ronin, and after a fight with Maya and the Tracksuit Mafia, Kate and Clint escape with the use of some trick arrows, specifically one with a pin particle tip. Now, with his hearing aid being knocked out and broken in the fight, we get a real emotional connection between Clint and his family. And this really highlights the best part about this mighty Avenger, his human side. Now, back at Kate's mom's house, Clint, Kate, Eleanor, and Jack are having a conversation about why an Avenger and a 22-year-old are working together. Kate's mom states that someone used her laptop to log into her work files, and Clint notices that the Ronin sword is sitting in the corner in her and Jack's possession. Now, after a bit of a guilt trip by Eleanor, Clint contacts his wife and not only tells her that he needs more time with what's going on, but also tells Laura that a gold Rolex watch was at the auction, and that was what the Tracksuit Mafia was originally after. Kate's mom makes a call, adds to her mystery, while Jack comes off as a goofball, which is interesting because it definitely keeps us guessing as to what they are up to. Now, also, keep in mind, Clint finds out that Kazi, Maya's right-hand man, seems to be on the payroll for a company that Jack runs, and he's listed as the CEO. This info is what was found when Kate accessed her mom's laptop. Later on, as Clint and Kate bond over some margaritas and Christmas movies, he tells her about meeting Natasha, the Black Widow, and Kate figures out that he is Ronin. From there, Clint has a nice little convo with Kazi about Maya's obsession with the Ronin character, and Kate meets up with Clint's new LARPer friends to see if they can do some favors and help out with what's about to go down. Now, things pick up. Kate sneaks into Maya's apartment because she's looking for that gold watch. Clint tells Kate that it belongs to someone he used to work with. Now, after tripping off a silent alarm, she alerts Maya, and Maya then ends up coming to the scene. And that brings us to an awesome rooftop fight between Clint, Maya, Kate, and Yelena. That's right, Natasha's little sister, who was introduced in the Black Widow movie, and told that Clint, as Ronin, killed Natasha during that movie's after-credit scene, has entered this series and really upped the stakes. We're shown what happened to Yelena when Thanos snapped away half the universe, and when she returned 5 years later. At this point, Kate tells her mom about Jack and then gets a visit from Yelena herself. Clint ends up visiting the site of the Avengers battle against the Chitauri, and he shares a moment where he talks to Natasha. Eleanor gets Jack arrested. Clint calls his wife again to update her on what's going on and what he's about to do. He's been bringing up Maya's boss throughout this entire series and simply addresses him as the big guy. With Clint back in his Ronin gear, he goes after the Tracksuit Mafia, and he handles them with ease, and allows him to have a one-on-one showdown with Maya once they're out of the picture. He tells her that they're the same. They're basically human weapons being manipulated by people. But he also tells her that the night her father was killed, it was on the orders of her boss. Maya gets pissed, turns the tables on him, gets the upper hand, and Kate swoops in for the save. Now, before we do get into our big ending, we do have a couple of pieces of the puzzle that fall into place. Maya questions Kazi on where he was the night her father was killed. Kate and Clint start preparing by getting their arrows that the LARPers got for them, along with some outfits that Kate had them make for her and Clint. And when you watch the show, you'll realize that it's all about branding for Kate. Yelena ends up texting Kate with the name of the person who hired her. It was Kate's mom. And Yelena then sends a picture of Eleanor with Maya's boss. And ladies and gentlemen, it's Vincent D'Onofrio. He's reprising his role as a Kingpin. You all know who I'm talking about. Straight from the Netflix Daredevil series, we have a great actor reprising a role that he made great and infamous. Now, Clint confirms all of this, and it's time for our big finale. With that same swagger and that same intensity that he showcased in the more gritty Daredevil series, the Kingpin is being told by Eleanor that she's done with him and she wants out of this. She ends up setting Jack up to take the fall, and she lets the Kingpin know that she's taking precautions if anything were to happen to her. Kingpin, being irate and pissed off, states that Ronin is now back, an Avenger is now involved in his affairs, and Eleanor wants out, but he's more pissed off that Maya has turned on him. He's looking to remind this city and everyone in it who runs it and who he really is. We fast forward to our Christmas party that's being thrown by Eleanor. We have Clint and Kate as guests, and the LARPers are set up as the staff just for backup. Jack has been released from jail and shows up with a sword, while Yelena has actually infiltrated the party. Shots start to ring out and they take out all the windows. Chaos ensues. Kate now runs to her mom and tells her that she knows everything. Yelena is now making a beeline straight for Clint. We get the Tracksuit Mafia showing up. They're confronted by Jack and his sword skills, and then the fight spills over to the heart of Rockefeller Center. Once Clint gets out of the big tree, don't ask, just go see the series for yourself. You'll know what I'm talking about. Our heroes take out the rest of the Tracksuit Bros with a slew of trick arrows, and now in full superhero gear, Kate and Clint give them hell. Maya now confronts Kazi, and Yelena does the same with Clint. While Kate catches up with her mom, she has to go through the Kingpin because he wants Eleanor first. Now, he might overpower Kate, but she ends up outsmarting him. Clint finally gets through to Yelena about what really happened with Natasha, and Yelena simply leaves. Eleanor is arrested, and Maya confronts the Kingpin, only to shoot him as the camera pans out. We don't really know what happened to him, but come on, if it didn't happen on screen, it didn't happen. Now, we close out the series with Kate joining Clint and his family on the farm, and we find out that there's a S.H.I.E.L.D. logo on that gold Rolex, implying that Laura was once a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. But that's another story for another time. At this moment, Clint and Kate burn the Ronin suit, and we end up with Kate trying to come up with some code names that she can go by. FYI, she goes by Hawkeye. So we have two. Now, this is a great series with many nods to the comics, but it's also a jumping off point for Maya, who's about to get her own Disney Plus show. Obviously, we haven't seen the last of the Kingpin, and with the recent addition of Charlie Cox showing up in the Spider-Man No Way Home movie, and Disney Plus announcing a Daredevil series on Disney Plus, we're about to get into the street-level aspects of the MCU, and it's going to be great. Keep in mind, if you've seen this, it's a great rewatch. If you haven't, please do so, because Phase 4 is on a roll and delivers on many levels. Please, if you like what I'm doing here, I want you to subscribe to the channel, make sure you hit the bell for notifications, and please leave a comment so I know that you're there. Most importantly, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend. Also, look in the descriptions. I need you to check this out, because my partner in crime, Bobcat the Legend, who's been giving us and providing us these great beats that you hear in the background, has his own YouTube page and his own Spotify page. As always, this isn't the end, it's simply to be continued with.